Today is our part two, generative AI tools for legal research and document drafting. It's actually where we get to go into the weeds a little bit. Um, Usually in the presentations I give, it's very high level. And this is still somewhat high level, but it's within 1 hour, I've hit ethics, prompting, history of AI, some use cases and examples. And obviously we can't pack all of that into an hour. You can, but you can't really unpack it. So today we're going to talk about generative AI tools for legal research and document drafting. I'm going to give you a little background before we get into specific examples. This is me. I'm Tom Martin. I'm the CEO and founder of LawDroid. And please, if you haven't, subscribe to lawdroidmanifesto.com. So LawDroid Manifesto is my newsletter where I keep you updated about the intersection of law and technology. I'm speaking for myself, but I think it's pretty cool stuff. There's also a podcast called LawDroid Manifesto. I just interviewed Patrick Pallas, who's a very successful workers' comp lawyer in Tacoma, Washington. And so that's filled with good information. Also, if you go to the LawDroid website, you'll see that there's a new link there to LawDroid University. And there's a couple of courses right now. One course is the ongoing episodes for LawDroid Manifesto, the podcast. And then also we have the entirety of the AI conference we had in January. All of the videos, transcripts of all of the sessions, key takeaways extracted by AI, of course. You also have quotable quotes that are extracted and a summary and a cute little chatbot that you could ask any question about a session and get up to speed quickly if you don't want to read through the whole transcript. So I encourage you to check that out. LawDroid University and LawDroid Manifesto. Really trying here to educate people about AI and how you can use it to your benefit. So today we're going to cover legal research tools, features, benefits, and use, legal document drafting, get hands-on with some of these actual examples and use cases, best practices. I'll talk about that throughout a little bit, and addressing the accuracy and reliability. Because, I do have access to LawDroid, but not access to Harvey or CoCounsel, the examples that you'll see that are more practical are going to be on LawDroid Copilot. And I'll explain a little bit how that works. So first off, let's zoom out. Really interesting studies that came out over the past couple of weeks that are starting to show how lawyers are actually using generative AI. So I wanted to share with you some of the trends in law firm use of generative AI. The first one is taken from a DevRev survey. They're a customer service company, and so they're using generative AI to automate customer service. Nonetheless, they did some research about Google searches and like the volume of Google searches where people were asking about, replacement by AI. And the search queries that came up the most were actually about lawyers being replaced. So when it comes to kind of self-reporting about concerns about a profession, lawyers rank number one, artists number two, naturally with the strike with the Directors Guild, the Actors Guild. They have a concern too about AI replacing a good portion of what they do, and they had language written into their agreement with the producers to avoid that. Accountants also are worried, and this is an order of worry, I guess. Doctors as well, though. As we probably have already heard, you can use AI to review X-rays and identify problem issues, which is actually fantastic, right? Because a doctor just might be tired because they work a lot, work many hours, just like we do, and they might miss something. So to have a second pair of eyes, even if it's an electronic pair of eyes, to catch something, I think that's all good, right? Data scientists for collecting data information, that can be aggregated and automated by AI potentially. But all of these things, as we know, it's a bit of a narrative, and I have a whole article on LawDroid Manifesto that I dedicate to this, where, you know, ATMs were supposed to replace bank tellers, but they didn't. Drones were supposed to replace pilots, but they didn't. And there's an interesting like economic argument as to why they don't replace us. First of all, for now we're in charge, and we get to say what the end goals are that we want achieved. And just naturally, like when you use automation, it makes whatever you're trying to do more cost effective. And when you can make that thing more cost effective, usually you can do more of it. And just really quickly, to give you one example of that, in the ATM situation, ATMs made running banks more cost effective. So it's cheaper to run a bank. Now, it's cheaper to run a bank because, yes, in the short term, it did replace some of the bank teller jobs. But if we stopped right there, we'd be freaked out, right? But if you take it to the next step, what happened, because it made running bank branches more cost effective, it allowed banks to open more branches. And by opening more branches, they essentially grew the demand for bank tellers in the branches. So, you know, there's a similar economics at play with the drones and pilot situation, and I think likely with AI and lawyers. But don't worry. So part of the Thomson Reuters survey that came out a couple of weeks ago was that 82% of legal professionals see the potential of generative AI in their work, which is good to hear. And some of the most common use cases that generative AI is being put to when AmLaw 100 law firms were being surveyed. And by the way, if I recall correctly, it was only around 41% of the AmLaw 100 that actually responded to the survey. But of those that did, one of the most popular uses of generative AI was summarizing documents, generating transcripts, followed by legal research, followed by drafting marketing materials and attorney bios. I do recall a quote that they took from a large law firm partner, where they mentioned that they hadn't used generative AI for anything sensitive, including client information, but they did use it to create bios for the summer associates. And this partner mentioned that it saved them about 160 hours of work that they otherwise would have spent on creating those bios. So ton of time is money. And then finally, e-discovery. 59% of managing partners believe generative AI should be integrated into legal work. So as we all have probably felt, and as you probably know, I'm a lawyer too, practicing for just over 25 years. So I'm not just a legal tech entrepreneur, but I have experience running my own law firm. And I think we're all feeling a bit of a pullback, right? There's a bit of a, I wouldn't call it a backlash, but a hesitancy about generative AI for good reason. And although we feel that it should be incorporated, you know, there's many different opportunities that we could take advantage of. Productivity, drafting and summarizing legal material, extraction, all of this good stuff. But at the same time, there is a bit of a concern, and 62% of law professionals have concerns. And so of the concerns that exist, the first one is, how's this going to affect our business model, right? You have the billable hour. Now that you can make it so much more efficient, does that mean you'll be billing less hours? Again, turning back to the this AmLaw 100 survey, when I read the article, there was a partner that mentioned that it actually didn't end up in them billing less hours. But the reason why is interesting. You might think, well, of course it didn't, because they want to bill as many hours as possible. But the reason why is interesting in that the AI was able to reduce the amount of busy work, right? And by reducing the amount of busy work, it actually allowed them to focus on the more interesting problems with that client. And so again, we're kind of seeing an analog here, right? With what I told you about the ATMs and drones situation, that it reduces busy work and actually allows you to focus on more interesting problems and get deeper into those problems. So you end up using the same amount of hours, but it's more high quality hours for yourself and for the client. Another concern is the black box, that you put information into this model and you get a response out of it. How did you get it? Security and confidentiality, of course, accuracy, avoiding hallucinations. And lastly, that there's this inherent risk that we're introducing, and that it could make mistakes. We need to supervise and review those mistakes to avoid them. And this is a quote that I put out on Twitter the other day, just as kind of like a call to action, that because of this, because all of this is coming so quickly to us, we really don't have the luxury, unfortunately, of just pushing back from the table. And so thank all of you. I see agreed there. Thank all of you for being here today, because you are on the right side of history, and you're curious, obviously, by being here, and it's a good thing. And you should experiment with this stuff. And so we're going to play around with it a little bit. But first off, let's talk about some definitional stuff, because we as lawyers, we love definitions, right? And if it's slightly off, then we've got to take issue with it. But what is prompt engineering? Let's start there. You've heard all about it. You may already know what it is, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Prompt engineering, first, let's look at the framework. And if you were here last week, this might look familiar, but I wanted to show you that the framework it falls within, the process is that you put a prompt into the AI. It creates a request of the AI, which looks like this. It breaks it down into essentially an order where you're providing your authorization that you could ask the question, what model you want to interpret your question. The prompt is like the actual question, what is the meaning of life? It doesn't have to be a question, though. It could be just a request for the AI to perform a certain action. And there's all the rest of it, and it results in a response. And the response is the gold. That's what we're looking for. But some responses are better than others. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. You may have put some prompts into ChatGPT, and the result you get is just really lackluster, and you're wondering, why are you bothering? Like, why is everyone else able to pull some magic out of AI? And I'm going to show you a little bit about that. I'm going to share some of the secrets with you, and it's pretty cool stuff. There's still going to be a lot more that you could get into, but we only have a limited amount of time. So prompt engineering is the process of designing and refining the inputs, what you put into the system, to guide AI models in generating specific and optimized outputs. So that's what prompt engineering is. How do you tweak your input to get a better output, more or less? Now, an example I want to show you is kind of self-referential here. A naive prompt, all right, which all of us have done, myself included, guilty. Don't worry about it if you're putting naive prompts into ChatGPT. But here you can see, I just asked it, like, what is prompt engineering? And of course, consistent with ChatGPT, it just goes on and on and on. And, there's additional pages here that I won't bore you with about what prompt engineering is. Like, if you're in learning mode where you're just trying to get everything in, this could be helpful, right? Because it really like provides you with different ways into it. Contextualization, precision, ethical considerations, the feedback loop, all of those things, which could be very helpful. But if you wanted just a precise definition, check this out. This this is an educated prompt because it comes with a little bit of training and background from me having worked with prompts for a while. But you see, it says, what is prompt engineering? No yapping. Like, I just learned that a couple of months ago from someone else who's been working on prompting. The no yapping, like I never would have thought of that. You could say like just be brief or whatever, but the no yapping, direction, it actually makes it extremely specific. And as you can see here, prompt engineering involves crafting and prioritizing inputs for AI models to elicit desired responses. Very to the point. Compare, contrast. Prompting makes a big difference, right? You can see that. So there are these things called prompt frameworks, and prompt frameworks are kind of like an approach, like a good example is IRAC, right? Issue, rule, application, conclusion. We're all familiar with that. Well, a framework for prompting is kind of the same thing. Here's one. There's three I'm going to share with you. The first one is RTF. So RTF, you assign a role to the AI, you give it a specific task, and lastly, you give it a particular format. So the role is usually to act as something, and you could be as particular as you want, like you were a lawyer with 30 years experience in personal injury law, but in particular toxic tort injury. That's a role. The task, I need you to write a motion about excluding evidence of my client's character that has nothing to do with their toxic injury. That could be a kind of task that you give the AI. And lastly, the format, you might even give it kind of like an outline of the pleadings, and here's the introduction, here's the law, here's the argument, conclusion. That might be a format that you provide to the AI. Here's an example though. So act like a lawyer with 30 years. Excuse me, 1 second. Act like a lawyer with 30 years. No. So act like a lawyer with 30 years experience in litigating. Give me a plan to improve my trial skills in table format. So this is following that RTF framework. Here, you could already see the difference, right? We're asking for the result in a particular format, a table format. We're giving it the role of a 30-year litigator, and we're asking for a plan to improve our trial skills. And it performs beautifully. If we had just asked it, give me some advice about improving my trial skills, it wouldn't be nearly this robust and precise and very easy to read in a table format. So this is one way, one method you could use to improve your prompting skills, is using the role task format framework. Another one is called chain of thought. And so chain of thought, like you would think, you insert what you want it to do with instructions, and then you ask it to think through step by step how you're going to get to that result. And it's just an eccentricity of the AI models that when you ask it to think through things step by step, that it just strangely kind of takes a step back, sees what the goal is, and then kind of walks you through how to get there. If you didn't ask it to do that, it would simply rush ahead and try to answer the question in a very verbose manner. So here's an example. How do I improve my motion practice? I've only been winning 25% of the motions I file with the court. I don't think it's my legal research. I just have a tough time presenting my case in court. Let's think it through step by step, right? So then you get some helpful tips. Yeah, Lee's calling it show your work, part of the prompt. Yeah, show your work or step by step. In either case, it essentially like unlocks the unlocks a like a unlocks the structure for how we approach this problem. In this case, step one, analyzing and reflecting, reviewing past motions, seeking feedback from others. Like all of this is perfectly logical and makes sense, but you probably wouldn't have gotten there if you just asked it without this framework. So this one is real gold here. It's called Risen. So Risen is the framework and it stands for role, instructions, steps, the end goal, and narrowing. So you can see that they played around with it a little bit to get to Risen. But the role is kind of this, the same as RTF. This is the role that they're going to play. The AI is going to play. Instructions, that's similar. Now, steps is we're kind of like incorporating the chain of thought idea into it. End goal, we give it the end goal. And narrowing, this is particularly interesting because you can give it this role, ask it what to do, and have it break down how it's going to get there. But then additionally, you want to give it a specific requirement, like it has to be under 500 words, or it can't be more than one paragraph, or whatever that restriction is that you want to place on it. Now, here, let's look at a example, and this one is longer and more involved. So I wanted to do a video with it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me pause there. So you're an expert personal injury lawyer who has an undefeated track record in winning cases at trial. That's someone you would want to get advice from if you're a PI lawyer, right? Please give me a list of everything important that I should include in my trial brief to prove that the driver of the vehicle that struck my client, who's a pedestrian, was at fault, right? Then here's the steps. Start by covering everything that any trial brief should include. Then proceed giving your thoughts on what this trial brief should include, and end with, best practices and strategies for winning at trial. The end goal is to give me, a concise list of everything that I need to do that. And then here, reducing it to 500 words, avoid technical jargon, make it actionable. Okay, so let's see what it comes up with. Okay, so first off, like we asked, it's giving like the essential overview of any trial brief. What you should include in it, the case summary, arguments, damages. Then the specific instructions. So like zooming in now for this particular kind of case, which is a pedestrian injury case, you want to look at liability evidence, medical expert testimony. Now, by the way, I know all of you may be thinking in the back of your head, this is kind of like surface level stuff. This is not really getting into the weeds, but this can definitely help, especially with more junior associates who may not have the lay of the land. If you have a lot of experience, you might already know some of this stuff. But I would point out that also, like in the doctor situation, we get tired, we forget stuff, and this could be very useful in, making sure that you don't miss anything, especially when preparing for trial, right? It gets pretty nutty. I know I've been there before myself, and it gets very tiring and you might forget something. And it also even gives tips for maximizing damages and winning at trial. So as we requested, it did give us a concise list of what we needed to focus on. And you could see what kind of value you can unlock by simply upping your game when it comes to prompting. Let's talk a little bit about beyond prompt engineering. Now, we touched on this last week, but in case you weren't here, and I'm going to give a little more color to it, we want to look at kind of a pyramid of good, better, and best when it comes to using AI models. The first one is just using ChatGPT, right? Playing around with it, naive prompts, just asking it for something directly, no problem. It's going to get you very familiar with how it works and what its limitations are. Now, when you take it up a notch to actually learning more about prompt engineering, how other people are using it, some of these frameworks, which I introduced 3 of them to you today, takes up your game to better. You're going to get a much more informed, much more useful and actionable response from AI models. Taking it up yet another notch is RAG. Now, RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, okay? And this is a bit of a process that you see here about how it works. So you get a question or request from a user, then that gets pulled down into the cycle of retrieving information from a reliable source of truth. Now, this could be American case law. It could be information that you've uploaded into ChatGPT. But what it does is it causes the AI to refer to that material before giving you a response. So unlike it would normally do, it would normally just answer you based on its generalized training over the whole web. But if you wanted it to be specific, you would give it material, or you might use a vendor that has trained it against specific material, a vendor like LawDroid or CoCounsel or Spellbook or Harvey. And then based upon that educated response, it provides a fuller prompt to the AI model, and then in turn gives a response to the user. So you can see here that this is at the top of the pyramid because it goes through an additional level of refinement beyond just prompting. So in a sense, it's not just the prompt, it's not just what you ask for, but it's also what you're querying against, like where it's coming from, what you ask for, but also the reliability and accuracy of the information that's being used. So you've heard of the term or the phrase garbage in, garbage out. Well, this is ensuring there's no garbage, right? So that's RAG. So let's look at some use cases. First off, here's a demand letter. So just to stop it for a second, and you may notice that some of these are pulled from the first presentation I gave, but now I've given you a whole video so we can see how it actually like plays out. But write an auto accident letter for our law firm, the Jones Law Firm, to a car insurance company asking for $150,000 in damages and some other damages. The accident occurred on January 1st, 2020. So let's see how it actually puts that together. One thing I would just point out here is that I didn't give it a format this time, right? But it's trained on so much information that, and I'll also point out that it's really improved over time. If you did this a year ago, it was much more threadbare. And now they have much more detail about, the ray and all of the different claim information that wasn't included before. This is also real time, the video. You'll see that sometimes it slows down, thinking a little bit about stuff more, and then sometimes it just races through it. But first off, you have the summary of the accident. Of course, you don't leave it at this, but it does hit on a number of things that are very common to demand letters, like referencing a police report, that there's some kind of, violation that occurred, and to fill in the blanks essentially. But it is providing a pretty good framework for what to fill in. The injuries and medical treatment, knowing well enough to include the reference to what the damages are for medical bills within that section, additional damages, and talking about, car repair costs, chiropractic treatment, which, yeah, maybe they should have included it. The AI should have put that in medical treatment. And then ultimately the demand for how much is necessary to make our client whole. When I first saw this, I thought that this closing paragraph was a little nice. Wasn't as aggressive as, I know I've phrased things in the past, but it's more along the lines of this is, we believe this is fair and just given the circumstances. We trust that you will give the matter attention. Well, I don't necessarily trust that opposing counsel is going to give it fair consideration, certainly not their client. But again, this is stuff that using the prompt, if I gave it a little more direction to be more aggressive, it could be, right? And then it even gives us the little disclaimer here that you should supplement with the details of your case. I would also point out there's actually a specific couple of companies that are focusing, in particular on demand letters for PI lawyers. And these AI companies are training against hundreds, if not thousands, of demand letters and then really dialing it in. The one that I heard about from a friend, they actually create a draft and then they get your feedback from it. So like they're doing a good job of really dialing it in. And I'm sure it'll be much better over time. And they could, plug into all of your medical records, all of the doctor's notes, all of the chiropractic notes, and put that so that there's, exhibits and attachments that could go into greater detail. Here's an example that could be very useful for you to just do some basic marketing. So if you have a probate practice, write an outline for an ebook about probate administration in California, right? Short summary for each step. Now, here's where I make it a little more sophisticated. Once you have drafted that outline, ask me if the outline is acceptable or if I want another version of it. And then lastly, if I say it's acceptable, then ask me if I would like it to draft an ebook based upon the outline. Okay, so I wouldn't necessarily call this a framework. I kind of made it up ad hoc, but basically we're creating a feedback loop where it creates something, then asks, then creates something, then asks, and could do more work for you that way. So here is the outline. Even for an outline, it's pretty decent. The topics, the headings are all of the things that. And by the way, it's a probate practice that I have. So familiar with all the steps, and yes, they're covering it. Do you find this acceptable, or would you like me to draft another version? Yes, it's acceptable. Yeah, great. Would you like me to draft you an ebook based on this? Of course I would. I don't want to draft it, at least initially. So not too shabby, right? Now it is pretty slim in the definition of probate and why is it necessary and all of that. It's a little bit more than the summary. It is expanding it's like doubling the content within each chapter that it's talking about here. But it's a good start. And also, based upon what I just showed you, you can put it back in again. So if you wanted to, I don't show it in this example, but if you wanted to expand it even further, what I would do, you copy and paste chapter 5, right? Transferring ownership, closing the estate. Let's say you copy that. And right before it, you say, please expand on the following chapter summarization. And then give it a constraint, right? Like I would like this expanded to at least 500 words. And then you might even give it direction about the reading level and your target audience. That's something that wasn't mentioned in the frameworks before. That's extremely important, is you should mention who your target audience is, because it really changes the tone and the explanation, um, and makes it much more custom for who you're seeking to read it. Email campaign. Um, this one is a 5-day follow-up sequence to market data security compliance. Fascinating stuff. Very necessary. But this goes through. Just want to show you that, oops. Sorry about that, guys. Should have just left it how it was. Okay, I'll just leave it alone. But I wanted to show you that it does have the end goal, which is we're trying to get them to sign up for a free consultation. And so it understands that these 5 different emails are intended to drive them towards that goal. So it talks about, data security, compliance challenges, actionable tips. So it also knows to provide some values, provide some, checklists that they could easily act upon before you hit them, with a request for a consultation. Also, some of the copy I noticed, it's trained on thousands, millions, probably, examples of marketing. And so it does a good job of kind of playing on emotions. Like in this case, being worried about complying and making sure that your client's data is secure. So that's an email campaign example. And this one, I mentioned this last time. We all have difficulty dealing with negative reviews. Obviously, we're lawyers. We want to defend ourselves. And so giving ourselves a little professional distance here is a good idea. And so ChatGPT helps us do that. We're taking your concerns very seriously and reviewing our protocols. Although we can't change the past experience, we're committed to making things right. So it's a textbook perfect response. It might be a little long-winded, right? For a review response. You wouldn't want to post that in Google because it would be a little too lengthy, but you get the idea. You could use it for reviews. There's a great repository on GitHub called Awesome ChatGPT Prompts, as well as 12 different styles of writing styles that Mitch Jackson wrote about, and the legal prompt engineering library with MIT. This is the Awesome ChatGPT Prompts. I'm just going to show you the tip of the iceberg, but just to give you a taste of what they have here. As we scroll down, you'll see that they have quite a number of, act as, which is essentially the RTF framework, where you assign it a role, a task. And as you can imagine, it's infinite, the amount of roles that you could assign to the AI to play. And to, to bring it into the law, it could be that act as opposing counsel, act as devil's advocate, argue against me, upload your motion, right? It extracts the arguments from your motion, and now it's going to argue against you on those points. That might be very useful for finding, holes in your argument. But it could also be, act as the judge in my case. So more impartial, hopefully, point of view. And you upload your motion, you upload opposing counsel's motion. How would you decide based upon this? Applications powered by ChatGPT, at least the AI model, case text, Harvey, Spellbook, Jurisage, which is now, I think, SiteRate, Clearbrief, fantastic product, and LawDroid. This is what LawDroid Copilot looks like. You have many different prompts that are available to you here. And this is on the Copilot screen. So you can, ask it to do some legal research. If it's late at the office and you don't want to talk to your partner about, the deadlines you have and how that's stressing you out, it'll provide some emotional support. It's actually pretty good. Of course, it does translation. It can help you to draft an email or letter. And there's also a free-form prompt where we have a direct connection to GPT-4. So if you're very familiar with prompting, you're using the frameworks, and you just want to go straight to GPT-4, you could do that through our system. And we also have a prompt creator so that it can help you create your own prompts if you're new to things and you want a little help getting more specific. So one thing that you could use generative AI for that is not legal research and is not drafting is lead generation. And to give you an example of that, this is our LawDroid Builder platform. And if you can, create a flow chart, you can create a bot that can intelligently respond to people and drive them towards capturing their information, getting a lead, increasing your business. So this part is that you can incorporate generative AI to answer frequently asked questions. If you have information on your website, or if you have materials that you, no problem, Lee, take it easy. Hope that goes well. But you could upload, materials that you have in your office that you use to train associates, and then you could use it to answer questions on the fly. So instead of having those leads be bombarding you with, questions that you don't want to be answering because you're not making any money off of it, you could, like here, answer a question about divorce in Texas in an automated fashion using generative AI, and thereby hopefully cut down on the repetitive questions that you have to deal with leads. And we also do integrate with Clio and others. This is showing you how we got the information into our system. You can create a knowledge base, and essentially you can copy and paste it in there. You could also create a knowledge group, which is multiple pieces of information that you've created one group of, and then integrate with Clio. You just put their inbox token into our system. And so after it captures all of the contact information, it hooks it into Clio and creates a new lead within their system. We also integrate through Zapier. So if you use Zapier, or we could set it up for you, we can integrate with thousands of different applications to get that information into the system. Legal research. Let's take a look at that and see how you can use generative AI for legal research on LawDroid Copilot. So here we're asking it to show me cases involving child custody where a parent has stopped paying child support in California. You do have to give it a jurisdiction, right? You don't want it to just be giving you a generalized response for the entire United States. And you could click on the preview. The preview will show you, like, why is this particular case coming up? So when you want to narrow down your research to a particular case, just look at the previews. And beyond the previews, you can do things you normally would. You know, you could read the case if you want to do that. You might do that afterwards just to verify everything. You could also brief a case, which is pretty neat, especially for law students that are jumping onto our platform. And as you would expect, it will brief the facts, the issues involved, procedural history, all of that. So we talked a little bit about prompting. And so what's happening in the background is that it is taking that relevant case, it is putting that into a vector database so that the machine can understand it as numbers, vectors, rather than text. And then it's finding the parts that are relevant and then running a series of prompts, not just one prompt, but a series of prompts that go to answer the question, what is the reasoning here? You know, what are the issues involved? What are the facts of this case? And then we string that series of prompts together and we get answers to them. You could also ask it follow-up questions like, what is the name of the judge who wrote this opinion? And it'll give you that. And you could ask it anything else. Provide me a summary of this case. How does this case apply to this hypothetical factual situation? You know, or additional ways that you could use the LawDroid's Copilot system to help you. Motion analysis. Now, you could also use this to analyze emotion. So we have a separate screen for analyzing documents. And let's say you have a motion for judgment notwithstanding the verdict that opposing counsel gave to you. And we upload it into our system. You can see the preview there. Whenever you run the AI analysis of the document, you still have the document you could refer to. In this case, we're extracting arguments. We don't want to read through the whole motion right now. We just want to get up to speed very quickly. This thing is due tomorrow, and we want to get those arguments extracted. And this gives us the overview. Gives us a quick summary of what's going on. Then it goes into the first argument that is being made by opposing counsel in this motion for judgment notwithstanding the verdict. It's about juror misconduct. Here on the left side, I'm pointing out to you that this is in fact in the motion. It's not just making stuff up. It even has citations to the law that opposing counsel is using to support its argument. Second argument, failure to meet the burden of proof. And the third is that the jury verdict was clearly erroneous, right? And you could see that the extraction of the arguments, it does give you the facts that opposing counsel is using as well as the law. Do we want to create counter arguments? Of course we do, Copilot. So you click with one button, you get it to create counter arguments, which you could copy and paste into a motion, but you want to review it and you want to add legal citations and support to it. You don't want to just take it at that and file it directly with the federal court, okay? Don't do that. But it does give you counter arguments that plays upon the facts that are at issue. There, giving you a little bit of support for that counter argument. And there, even specifically about the direction of Thelma Avenue, right? And so it goes into more detail about what arguments you can make to counter opposing counsel. Good starting point. But also, if we wanted to extract the legal citations, this is important because sometimes, right, sometimes opposing counsel says that a case stands for a certain proposition that it may not necessarily actually stand for. Here I'm just showing that these are in fact cases drawn from the document. This one in particular, that we're going to go back to in a second, Bernard, it describes that it's within the sound discretion of the court to grant a motion for a new trial. Now that's what they're saying it stands for. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but we're going to jump back into our case law research that we looked at earlier, and we're going to cross-reference that. So we pull up case law research, we put in the particular citation, and just remind the system that it's Maryland that we're looking through. And sure enough, at the very top of our list, we have that case. And so we can create a summary of that case. And the summary is going to give us what the case stands for. And so if we look within that, and it's going to take me a little while here because it's a bit of a longer summary, because the prompt behind the scenes is to be a little more verbose in that summarization. But here we can see that, you know, the standard is abuse of discretion. Okay, so opposing counsel in that case did not stretch the truth. And it's just a very helpful way of cross-referencing case citations and the law, and making a better argument. So beyond prompt engineering, what could that be? Well, it's something called agents. And here at LawDroid, we're working hard to make life even easier for you. So beyond prompt engineering, we've created these different agents. Now, how's an agent different than prompt engineering? An agent is different in that an agent can be given a goal to accomplish and then work at that 24/7, 365, right? So, for example, the generative AI Q&A bot, that is a bot that you can create with one click on LawDroid, where you can give it a body of knowledge, and you can give it somebody who's curious and asking questions, and it will answer questions, and it will do that job, and it will do it for you. They don't have to have an account with LawDroid, unlike the GPT store with OpenAI. You can put this anywhere. You can put it on your website, and it could communicate with the public. Of course, you give it constraints. You put a disclaimer that it's not legal advice, not creating an attorney-client relationship, all that good stuff, but it could be working for you 24/7, 365. Second one, a simple lead capture bot, which you got a glimpse of. One click, you can create something like that on LawDroid and have it on your website, talking to people, trying to generate new business. The third one, a document automation bot. Essentially, you could be sending this out to your clients by email. It could just be a link in your email. Hey, I have a few questions for you before we have our initial meeting. If you can please click on this link. I have this, you know, this chatbot that's going to ask you a few questions. By the way, when you use a chatbot, it's much more likely they're going to actually complete the form. Static forms, not as compelling. And so this document automation bot can be working to gather the information. And then in the background, without them knowing, it is extracting those answers and then filling out a document, which we natively integrate within our system. And so you can get the benefit of that. You could have, let's say, a living trust, 90% completed by the client themselves from their input. You put some, polish it up a little bit, and you'll be ready to go. So thank you all. I want to encourage you to follow me on lawdroidmanifesto.com. If you go there, you could sign up for the newsletter. I have over 4,000 subscribers right now. And it is, if I do say so myself, a good resource for further information about how to use AI in your law practice. We're all about trying to create and help lawyers build AI-first law firms and to really get ahead of your competition. So check out lawdroidmanifesto.com. And thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend it with me. And I hope you learned a thing or two. And also next week, we're going to be focusing in particular on client interaction and legal service delivery with AI. Like, how can we use AI to optimize that part of it? So there's a few helpful tips. What am I thinking about? There's a few helpful tips that we're going to go over next time, and frameworks as well. So hope to see you then. Take care. Have a great day.